They didn't lose a final battle. They didn't surrender. They didn't sign a treaty. One day they were a superpower. The next they were gone. Cities burned. Palaces stood empty. Kings stopped writing. Trade routes went silent. And one of the most powerful empires on earth vanished so completely that later civilizations would forget it ever existed. They erased the ink, but not the truth. This is the story of the empire that disappeared in what felt like a single night. This is history decoded. When we hear the word vanished, we imagine magic. But history is more frightening than magic because it uses real people, real hunger, real fear, real mistakes. The empire we are talking about did not fall in a single moment. It collapsed so fast and so completely that to the people living through it, it must have felt like the world was ending. Historians call it the Late Bronze Age collapse. Around 1200 BCE, the greatest powers of the ancient world began to fail, one after another. Not over centuries, over decades, sometimes even just years. And among them was one empire so powerful that it once challenged Egypt itself, the Hittite Empire. If Rome vanished tomorrow, the world would notice. But the Hittites vanished, and history forgot them for 3,000 years. The Hittites ruled most of what is now modern-day Turkey. Their capital, Hattusa, was a fortress city of massive stone walls, grand temples, detailed archives, and royal palaces. They commanded professional armies with advanced weaponry. They negotiated complex international treaties, some of which are still studied today. They controlled the vital trade routes for bronze, the very metal that powered their entire age. They were not primitive. They were organized, advanced, and deeply connected to the global system of their time. Then something happened. Their cities emptied. Their records stopped. Their capital was abandoned, and eventually it was burned to the ground. There was no final speech from a king, no final message to the people, just silence. History rarely gives us last words, but sometimes it does. In the ruins of a coastal city called Ugarit, archaeologists found clay tablets hidden in palace archives. They were letters, urgent messages sent between kings and their officials, written as enemies were approaching from the sea. One desperate message warns, "Our ships are away. The enemy is coming." These tablets were never delivered because the city was destroyed before they could be sent. The intense fire that consumed the palace actually baked the clay hard, preserving these messages forever. It's one of the closest things we have to a voicemail from a collapsing civilization, a final, haunting whisper from a dying world. Here's what makes this so terrifying. Their world was globalized. The Bronze Age kingdoms were deeply dependent on trade. Tin from as far away as modern Afghanistan, copper from distant mountains, grain from the fertile river valleys of Egypt and Mesopotamia. No trade meant no bronze. No bronze meant weak armies and tools. Weak armies meant rebellion and invasion. The collapse wasn't just about destruction. It was a chain reaction. It was like removing one single card from the bottom of a house of cards and watching the entire intricate structure fall down. History records a name, but not a face. They were called the Sea Peoples. Ancient Egyptian inscriptions describe mysterious fleets arriving on their shores, cities burning, borders failing, but no one knows exactly who they were. Were they pirates? Migrants fleeing a disaster? Refugees looking for a new home? Or maybe former soldiers, mercenaries with no homeland left to return to. The truth is, they may not have been a single group at all. They may have simply been desperation turned into movement, hunger with ships. But empires don't just run on gold and armies. They run on food. And growing evidence suggests that long, severe droughts struck large parts of the eastern Mediterranean around this time. Harvests failed. Grain prices skyrocketed. The populations of large cities grew restless and hungry. Kings, who were often seen as being responsible for maintaining cosmic order and prosperity, began to lose their authority. When people starve, loyalty dies first. What if the ground itself betrayed them, too? Some ruined cities from this period showed damage that is consistent with major earthquakes. Walls were weakened. Crucial grain storage buildings were destroyed. People were displaced, becoming refugees in their own lands. An earthquake alone is probably not enough to destroy an entire empire. But it is more than enough to push a system already stressed by famine, war, and economic turmoil right over the edge. And what about the capital of the Hittite Empire itself? Hattusa was not dramatically conquered in a great final battle. It was emptied. Archaeology suggests the city's elite may have fled first, taking what they could carry. The entire administration, the engine of the empire, simply collapsed. Then, sometime later, a fire consumed the abandoned city. It wasn't a heroic ending. It was a quiet one, like turning off a light in an empty room and just walking away. Now, let's zoom out. This wasn't just happening to the Hittites. In Greece, the great Mycenaean palaces were destroyed. Across the Levant and places like Syria and Canaan, major cities were burned or abandoned. On the island of Cyprus, a critical hub for trade, civilization went backward. Major cities across the entire ancient world were destroyed or abandoned within the span of a single generation. The ancient world didn't just fall. It was unplugged. Trade stopped. The art of writing was lost in many places. Technology actually regressed. The entire international system, built up over centuries, disappeared. So why didn't anyone see it coming? Because collapse is slow until it isn't. One bad year is survivable. You can tighten your belt. 2 bad years is painful. 3 bad years breaks systems. Empires are good at planning for wars. They are not good at planning for everything to fail at once. There is no single villain in this story. Only pressure, drought, migration, war, rebellion, economic collapse, natural disasters. History's most honest answer is this. The system had become too complex, too interconnected, and too rigid to survive that much stress all at once. It broke under the strain. The most chilling piece of evidence is not what we find, but what we don't. It's what stopped. Writing, official administration, long-distance trade. For centuries after the collapse, much of the knowledge of the Bronze Age was lost. The world became smaller, darker, quieter. This period is often called a dark age for a reason. Our world today is more connected than their world ever was. We rely on global food systems, international shipping lanes, complex energy grids, and digital technology networks that span the planet. Complex systems are incredibly powerful, but they are also incredibly fragile. History doesn't repeat itself, but it certainly does rhyme. The Hittites did not disappear in one night, but their memory did. Their world ended so completely, so totally, that later generations who walked over the ruins of their cities believed it had never existed at all. They erased the ink, but they couldn't erase the truth. Empires don't always fall to their enemies. Sometimes they simply collapse under their own weight. If you want more stories hidden beneath the forgotten centuries of our past, subscribe to History Decoded, because the past is not dead. It's just encrypted.